we pick up with our old friend Francis Lymond, only this time he's in France, and this time there are elephants. Today we're going to talk about Volume 2 of Dorothy Dunnett's famous Chronicles of Lymond, Queen's Play. Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to High Lowbrow, because culture matters and it is good to have fun. And I have, above all else, fun reading these books. This is book 2, Queen's Play, Queen's NS apostrophe play. So the sort of theme of the series titles are chess, titles that echo in chess. And so we have sort of a play around queens here. Interestingly, by the way, in book 1, every chapter began with an excerpt from, I think, an actual period manual on chess. Book 2 does not. Book 2, I'm not sure what the source is, but the quotes sound like they're from some kind of description of late medieval or early modern French law. So we have all these quotes talking about, who will be liable for this or that, or is a person guilty in these circumstances. Kind of setting the atmosphere for each chapter. So this is book 2. It's a story of espionage. It's a story of mystery. It's kind of spy versus spy. It's a cat and mouse game. Lymond spends much of the book in disguise, although it's pretty obvious. I'm not going to hide it. It's pretty obvious if you are paying attention who he is from the beginning. But if you didn't get it, like 2 chapters later, there is a reveal. So most of the characters don't realize he's in disguise, but you will. So I'm not going to play coy about it at all. Here is the setup. The basic driver of the plot is that there is believed to be a plot to assassinate young Princess Mary. This is Mary who will grow up to be Mary, Queen of Scots, right? You'll recall that book 1 happened in the year 1547. Book 2 basically picks up, is it 1548? It's shortly thereafter. So the woman who will be Mary, the young princess who will be Mary, Queen of Scots, is a 5-year-old. And her mother, Mary de Guise, the French queen, believes that she's going to be assassinated. And she wants Francis Lymond, our hero, to protect the princess. And so he's recruited. They don't come to a complete agreement, Francis and the queen. She wants some kind of a fealty and permanently entering his service. And spoiler, she still wants it at the end of the book. He won't do that. So he agrees he'll undertake the task, but basically as his own man. Why is this? Well, I mean, he's no man's servant, right? This is who he is. He values his independence extremely highly. Of course, in doing so, he is less under the queen's protection than he might otherwise be. And this actually becomes an issue late in the book when essentially she disavows him. At a moment when he looks liable to be condemned to death. So he is aiming to foil attacks on the princess, who the princess spends the entire book in France. So Francis, after the initial kind of recruiting conversation, enters France in disguise. Now, he enters France in disguise with an Irish party. The head of the Irish party is an Irish nobleman, the Prince of Barrow, whose name is Philem O'Liam Roe, or the O'Liam Roe. And because the Prince of Barrow is a blonde man, because Francis is blonde, there are some people in the French court who are looking for Francis and who believe that the O'Liam Roe is Francis. So some of the sort of attention, like would-be assassins and poisonings and shootings and stuff, are directed at Philem. He's an important, interesting character in the book. Let's talk about him a little bit. He is important politically in Ireland, and even has some amount of wealth. Nothing like the French court of Henry Valois, of course. he is a man who is sort of philosophical and poetic and values nobility and truth, but he doesn't have the sort of ambition or the aggression that the French nobles exhibit towards each other. So he's generally regarded as being, lazy and he's dismissed. Although over the course of the story, and by the way, over the course of the story, he and Francis fight. So Francis comes into the country in his retinue and in disguise, and the prince knows who he is and knows he's in disguise and understands why. But at various times they're at loggerheads, and like the queen, at various times, Lymond considers throwing Francis to the wolves, revealing his identity, turning him in, right, etc. As at various times it may seem that what Francis is up to is, in his own interest, shady, no good. So Lymond comes with two people. He has a servant, Pietro Dulli, and then he has Francis. But Francis is in disguise. And now, by the way, I need to apologize right now. I'm going to try to say various Irish names and words, and I'm sure I've already gotten them wrong. I'm going to get them more wrong. So he brings with him what he refers to as his Ulouv, which is spelled Ollave, and I'm not sure it's pronounced Ulouv, but I think it is. Okay. What is this? He brings along a hired poet. And the poet is Francis. And the poet's name is Thady Boy Balach. And the poet has black hair because this is Francis, but he's dyed his hair. Okay. He's in disguise. He's also wearing an artificial paunch made of like a soft sheep skin. It's like a fake belly to look like a fatter man than he is. And then he just drinks like a fish for his time in France until he no longer needs the disguise because he's put on a bunch of weight from being drunk all the time. Okay. So it's Francis. He's in disguise. Now, I think that in Irish Gaelic, I think Ulouv does not mean minstrel or poet. I think it means something like master. And I think, man, I could be wrong. I think a person could be in different lines of art or crafts, could be regarded as Ulouv, as a master. So I think the point of calling Thady Boy Balach his Ulouv is that I have hired a poet to come here and accompany me, a performer, and he is a master, right? He's an accomplished, he's a top guy. And Thady Boy Balach apparently is a real guy. We never see the real guy. He's off stage in Ireland. Francis is impersonating him for the first half of the novel or so. Why? Well, Lymond is his entry into court. Although at a certain point, when Lymond, there's a terrific scene. Lymond becomes convinced. So this is a novel in which there are all kinds of machinations and counter machinations, and some of it is like attempted murder, but some of it is much more social. So some of the conspirators against the young queen, the young princess, okay, believing that initially that Lymond is Francis, try to get him to sort of bar himself from court. Here's how they do it. So the story, we never get to Paris. The story happens in Dieppe and Rouen, and then Blois in the Loire Valley. So it happens kind of in northern France at various places where the King Henri has palaces, has residences. Okay, so the Irish group, the three of them, are coming up the river, having been invited to court, and the Lymond, Prince of Barrow, receives an invitation to play tennis with the king. Okay. Which already he's like, I have to, he's very laid back. He's philosophical. He isn't hyper competitive like the nobles of the French court are. So he's a little bemused by this whole invitation to play tennis anyway. Right. So, but then a group of the women at court send him what is apparently a friendly message. And the friendly message says they're trying to humiliate you. The man you're going to see tomorrow is not King Henri. It's Henri's bodyguard, his double, a man who sometimes appears for him in public when there's thought to be a risk of assassination, and they don't send the real king, they send this guy. And he's sort of brought to the window by one of these women and say, look down there, you'll see them. And he sees a guy who looks just like King Henry, but is clearly not King Henry because he's just in ordinary clothes and he's like standing on the street or something. And she tells him, well, that's him, right? This turns out to be a trick. The tennis game is with the real King Henry, but Philim is a complete, his approach to like, okay, they're trying to make me look like a rube and trick me and make me like fawn to this body double. So instead, he's totally rude and snubs and talks down to and insults this person he takes to be the body double, who is in fact the real king. Right. So the Oleum Row gets banned. And then Francis, this is all very early action to give you kind of a sense of kind of how this novel goes. Francis, as Thady Boy Balak, has to win re-entry for them both to the court. The first thing he does is he foils an attack on, I think it's on the king's children. I think maybe including young Princess Mary, not sure about that, which is there's a procession, there's a parade. By the way, what this book has a lot of that are terrific is there's all these set pieces where within the confines of a particular scene, a hunting scene or a game or a drinking contest or something, a horse race, an intrigue or an attempted murder or something gets woven in. So one of these set pieces is this parade, and at a certain, which has elephants, and at a certain point there is there's a float in this parade that looks like a whale, and it's deliberately shoved sideways into the side of an elephant to stampede the elephant to try to put the lives of the royal children at risk. Francis. It turns out, by the way, the elephant keeper who is posing as an Indian is a Scot, which Francis has figured out. And Francis stops the stampeding elephant with great risk to his own life. Of course, everyone thinks he's Thady Boy Balak, the Aluv, and then he gets invited to court. Not initially Philim Row, initially just Francis, but then he endears the entire court to him and gets Philim Row an invitation too. So this is sort of the kind of thing that is happening in this novel. People trying to figure out who is Francis, and initially they think it's Philim, and then they start to realize who it really is. Francis is trying to figure out who is trying to kill the princess, and I won't give spoilers too much into that. So it's a novel of intrigues and a lot of thefts and double crossing and lies and secret attempts at murder. So let me give you a couple examples of sort of the set pieces to give you a sense of like what I find really fun about this novel. By the way, what does Thady Boy do? I mean, he sings and he plays, but he also juggles and does magic tricks, and right, he's an entertainer. So, and he does it. The court becomes rapidly in demand at the court, which gives him access to. He's around Princess Mary a lot. He's around sort of the suspects, and he starts to narrow in on who he thinks. Is actually he fairly quickly narrows in on who is trying to actually commit the murder. It takes him longer to figure out who is behind it, who is pushing that person to do it. So we get set pieces like the following, for example. I'll just describe two of them. One of them is a hunt. There is a hunt, and it's of rabbits, and there a couple of beasts, several beasts figure into this hunt. One is the Prince of Barrow has taken a liking to an Irish woman named Uno Dwyer, who's at the court. And she seems to be kind of the mistress of another Irish prince, Cormac O'Connor, who's a big drunken lout. Nevertheless, Philim, who's sensitive and poetic and interested in philosophy and courtly things, is fallen for Una O'Dwyer, and he's bought her a dog. I'm going to say this wrong. It's an Irish name. It looks like Luathas or Luthas or something to me. This noble Irish wolfhound, and so this dog is on the hunt with them, which he's brought as a gift, and everybody admires as a beautiful, noble dog. There's also a cheetah. And so they go, and there's a hunt in over field and forest, and there are rabbits, and I think there are, sort of serfs out there sort of making sure the rabbits are being driven in front of the hunting party, right? And the little Princess Mary, who is again 5, is in this party. Then two things we've been kind of racing for several pages, and right. A couple things happen at once. One is suddenly a tame rabbit is on the field, a rabbit that's not supposed to be there. Right? They're hunting rabbits that are in their burrows out here on King Henri's land, and suddenly the court realizes that one of the rabbits in front of them is the pet rabbit of Princess Mary. And she goes running for the rabbit. At the same time, this sort of hunting cheetah that the party has, that is a partially tamed, partially domesticated beast, if at all, right? I mean, this is like a hunting falcon or something. It's prized because it will kill things, and it's sort of trained to be handled by by someone who really knows the animal, right? The cheetah gets loose, and the cheetah goes racing for the rabbit and also for the little queen, right, the princess. What happens, of course, is a combination of Felim Oliam Rowe sending this dog, right, that he's just bought as a gift to impress Una O'Dwyer, and she doesn't seem to have been especially impressed. Hurls itself, he sends it, and it attacks the cheetah fearlessly, right? And the dog is outmatched, so it's this terrible sort of piteous scene of a dog sacrificing itself, right? Fighting to death to defeat the cheetah, right? And like going down, dying with its jaws clamped on the cheetah. The cheetah's not dead, but effectively, the dog has bought enough time that Thady Boy Balak and swoops in. I think at one point he throws his cloak in front of the cheetah to slow it down so the dog can get it, and then he goes and scoops up the princess and rushes her off the field, right? So, I mean, I've compressed this. This is a chapter, but this is the kind of thing Francis is sort of defending against, trying to figure out. In fact, that's actually the scene where he realizes who it is that released the cheetah and put the rabbit on the path. So he realizes who the would-be sort of repeated assassin is. So that's an example. Let me give you another example of sort of the many very cool set pieces. And by the way, this chapter, I have no idea if things like this were really done. I hope so. But, I said when we talked about book 1, the first Chronicles of Lymond, or Lymond Chronicles book, you catch her in anachronisms. There is a lot of historical research in these books. There is also a lot of invention and fantasy, right? I'll tell you, my favorite anachronism is that I caught Dame Dunnett in this book is her use of the word Baroque. At one point, I can't remember, the arrangements or the furniture of some room were said to be Baroque. Well, this story's happening in like 1548. It's 50 years too soon for anyone to be using the word Baroque, right? So, she's not flawless. Or maybe those are deliberate little flaws left for us to discover. In any case, I don't know if the following is an example of sheer Dorothy Dunnett invention, might be, or if the French nobility did stuff like this, in which case, wow. So there's a game. They play a game. They call it the steeple chase one night. And Thady Boy Balak, Francis, plays, and you play in teams of 2. These are all men. Mostly they're noblemen, Okay, mostly they're French noblemen. These are like some of the senior. The king's not playing. There's some of the senior nobility in the kingdom are playing this game. You play in two, and you're roped together. I'm not sure how long the rope is, but I'm thinking it's like 12 feet or 15 feet or something. It's got to have a little bit of distance, because what is the game? Well, the game is sort of one part scavenger hunt and one part obstacle course, and it's also kind of one part the floor is lava. Okay? And by the way, they all start drunk. They go get drunk, and then they climb up on a rooftop. And the deal is this: there are 12 stations around the city, and you can reach all of these things without ever touching the ground inside or outside of a building. You can't touch the floor in the building. The floor is lava. You can't touch the street. Okay. If you do, you're out. So you're running on rooftops, but these 12 stations, each of them has, so you start with a clue. That's sending you somewhere in this city, and you got to figure out the clue and run to that place. And then in that place, there'll be a clue to the next place. But there will also be a word. Okay. And there are 12, I think 12, maybe it's 11. Maybe it's 11. My French spelling is not always excellent. There are 12 words that themselves comprise a riddle. And so you have to go to these 12 stations. I think it must be 11. So you get to the last station, and you have to have solved the riddle, right, without ever having touched the floor, or, by the way, broken your neck, because it's night and you're drunk and you're running around jumping over alleys, right, and sliding in through upper windows and hanging from rain gutters, right? And by the way, these guys are playing to win, so they're like trying to push each other off, right, and trip each other as they're running along gables and stuff. So again, I don't know if the French nobility actually did this, but if they did, wow. So it's a terrific sequence. Lymond's partner is a guy named Robin Stewart, who is there's a company of Scottish archers in the service of the king. Robin is one of them. He's a character we see a lot of. And so you see people are falling down, they're getting injured, they're, the scaffolding they're standing on is collapsing, or they just trip and they land on the ground, or they touch the floor on accident, and they're sort of slowly being eliminated. The nature of the riddle, by the way, each of the sort of clues for the riddle is a single word. It's a virtue, right? And they're all in French, so it's like obédience, honneur, right? Obedience, honor. I forget what they all are. The riddle is an acrostic. So if you take just the first letter of I think it's 11 words, and you scramble them, justice is one of them, justice. It reads Henri Valois, right? The king's name, Henry Valois is his family name. So you have to get to the first one to the last station, having solved the riddle. The answer to the riddle is Henri Valois. So the whole thing is these hyper macho, hyper competitive, hyper drunk, right, senior men of court. I mean, these are like the king's brothers and cousins and stuff, right? And it's all sort of in the honor of the king, right? So absolutely fantastic, really fun to read. So ultimately, well, not ultimately. I won't spell out the whole plot. But the way this goes, the first half or so is in France, and then Francis leaves France. He leaves France under a cloud, because there is under a cloud and under a great deal of mystery. There is a death. So another one of these set pieces is a horse race. I think it might also be at night. But the murderer saboteur runs a line across and at this point they're not trying. That person has figured out who Francis is. This is not to kill the queen. This is an attempt to kill Francis. A line across the course, and basically causes a pileup of horses with the death of several horses. I think the death of one man or maybe two, and a bunch of severe injuries. Right, these horses come pelting around a corner, and then suddenly they slam into each other. Francis is he's taken prisoner, and he escapes by and he's injured. He escapes by burning down the building he's in, and he is believed to be dead. But also, the enemies who have realized who he was basically accuse Thady Boy Balak of being the one who's been trying to kill the princess. So about halfway through the book, he is Thady Boy is basically under criminal suspicion at the court, but also believed to have died in the fire. That's the only reason we don't execute him, is because he burned to death in this, I think it's a warehouse or something. Maybe it's just a house. I can't remember. But Francis goes back to England, pursuing the killer. So there's some. By the way, he and Philim O'Liam Rowe have fallen out. Philim is in London, back ahead of him. Philim kind of stumbles across a different end of the plot, and they end up working together, doing some kind of detective work. Francis shows up in England as the herald of Mary de Guise, the Queen of France, right? So she has not disowned him at this point. In fact, she's sort of invested him with more authority. And he and the French diplomat, without legal police powers, are sort of moving around, extorting people, capturing people, spying, to sort of try and find out ultimately the secret of, they know at this point who's trying to commit the murders. The question is who's behind them and why. Ultimately, Francis has to come back to France, where he has to sort of he has to admit to being Thady Boy Balak. So he has to kind of go on trial to defend himself against these accusations that he's the murderer, at which point, for reasons, the Queen, Mary de Guise, will not support him. So it looks like he's being thrown to the wolves. There's a final, so Philim, they've had some kind of, they've been allies, they've been kind of enemies, they've been allies, they've been kind of enemies. Philim is ultimately on his side, and trying to move pieces in his favor at the court while Francis is in prison there at the end. We ultimately get another very cool set piece, which is the final assassination attempt, which is it's on a lake. The princess is going to be out boating. This is really not the spoiler, because this is sort of told to you up front. Her boat is packed full of fireworks, full of explosives. And the plan is that the assassin's just going to shoot a fire arrow into her boat and blow her to smithereens in the middle of this little boating excursion, which the occasion of it is the English, who is it? I don't think it's King Edward. I think it might be King Edward. Some English nobleman is coming over to be, I can't remember. It's a big knighthood investiture. And I can't remember if it's the English Order of the Garter that is going to invest King Henri, or if it's the other way around. There's an Englishman. I think that's it. I think the English Knights of the Garter are over here, and they're going to invest the king and maybe some other French noblemen. So there's like a big kind of chivalry thing going on, all the pavilions, all the feasts, and the ladies are supposed to be out kind of boating around the lake, and the plan is to blow the princess up. And there's a terrific set piece where Francis is kind of gets yanked out of prison by sort of allies who've been persuaded by the O'Liam Rowe, and rushes out to save the princess. And it involves Philim, and it involves, of course, Francis, and it involves an elephant. The same elephant, comes back, which is nice. The elephant has a little bit of a subplot, right? The elephant puts the princess's life in danger early on. The elephant is part of saving the prince. Spoiler, Mary, Queen of Scots, does not die at the age of 5. As part of saving the princess's life from this assassination plot. And there's this terrific scene. You could almost just go through. I mean, the problem is you wouldn't know the characters, but you could almost read these separate chapters as just individual short stories, as just little self-contained pieces of theater. So there's a great one at the end where Francis has figured out who his enemy is at court, who's trying to kill the princess. Right, we're right at the end. The plot's been foiled, and that guy holds Francis prisoner, and Francis is sort of freed. The brother of the guilty man shows up and sort of calls him out, and frees Francis. And in that freeing, Francis challenges this nobleman to a duel. The nobleman accepts, and this plays out over a couple or three scenes, but it's this very cool way that the book ends. The nobleman, as the challenged, has the right to name very specifically the weapons that will be used in the duel. So his messenger comes back and lists an extremely elaborate set of weapons, right? We're gonna duel. The first round will be in full plate armor, and it has to be, gilded, and this weapon and that weapon, and you have to have a such and such a horse, right? And it's like an extremely expensive, extremely high-end set of weapons, right? He didn't just say we will duel with bows or something, right? We will duel with swords. No, he listed a whole bunch of really specific stuff. What is this? This is a power play. This is a move. This guy has sort of been exposed. He is going to be removed from court now, right? He's going to humiliate Lymond on his way out. He's at least going to say, yeah, humiliate Francis, right? I am still this guy. I am rich and you are nobody. Because if Francis doesn't have those weapons, if he can't agree to fight with those weapons, then he has to withdraw, right? And it'd be a social victory, a kind of a last minute redemption for the murderer, right? I am still noble. You are nothing. Francis agrees. And then I think it's then like the day of the duel, right? When they're there, all of the stuff that Francis would need shows up, right? The expensive armor, the expensive horses, all the multiple and expensive weapons. And it's marked with the crest of the king, right? The king has given Francis all of his stuff to fight this duel with, right? It's just this wonderful kind of subtle, the guilty man, the guilty noble's attempt to really socially insult Francis on the way out is rebuffed by the king saying, look, I have seen all the evidence now. Whatever people said about this man when he was Thady Boy Balach, I embrace him, right? I support him. And so the guilty man withdraws, not only having been proven guilty already, but now also humiliated and been given the signal that he will not be allowed at court, right? So, all right, I'm trying to tell sort of the outline of the story and give you a sense of what is terrific about this story and why it's very fun, without giving away too many details. So one of the interesting things that happens, so we meet characters now who are going to recur. We're going to see Uno Dwyer again. For example, we hear an interesting thing about, we don't know what this means yet, but there's this hint. There's a woman called the Dame de Dutenance, the Lady of Dutenance, in I think she's in Rouen, and we see her up front. We see her late, and she's saying, without explaining them, kind of mysterious things that imply there's something wrong with Francis's family tree. There's something he doesn't understand about it, and whatever it is he doesn't understand, it seems to be what has driven his brother and his brother's wife Mariotta have had a baby, and they've named it not a family name. They've named it, in fact, kind of weirdly, an English name. They've named the child Kevin, and and the Dame de Dutance kind of hints to Francis that this is because of secrets, skeletons in Francis's family's closet. So this kind of is planted, Francis gets, Francis is now, because of baby Kevin, Francis is no longer the master of Coulter, the heir of the Crawford family, the heir to his brother Richard, as he was in book 1, right? But he's ennobled in France. So he's given land, he's given Sévigné. This is a spoiler, but it's not important in the plot. This is just his reward at the end. He's given Sévigné, and he's made a comte. So the king recognizes him by turning Sévigné into a comté, the seat of a count, and he is a count. So at the end of the book, he's a minor nobleman of the French court, right? So we see the ambit, the area of Francis's operations expanding, and where this is going to go is book 1 and book 2 are fairly self-contained, and then kind of book 3 through 6 are kind of one long story, and these sort of things, questions about Francis's family, right? Francis getting involved in international operations are gonna drive the plot over the next 4 books. I mentioned this when we talked about book 1. I suspect this is because she probably Dunnett's first book deal was probably 2 books, and they didn't know whether it was going to be a long series, but it was successful enough that then they probably came back and said, look, we want 6 books. And so she started planning and thinking on that kind of scale. And you see that in the way that this book ends up. So a lot of fun, super intelligent, fair amount of Latin, a lot of French in this book, a lot of rhyming and singing, and a lot of these just really cool kind of court scenes. Ladies, but especially gentlemen at court doing sort of competitive things with each other, hunting, racing, games, etc., which mask underhanded attempts at power politics and even murder. So that's it. Super fun. Series is only going to get better. This is book 2 of the Lymond Chronicles, or Chronicles of Lymond. Queen's Play. I think book 3 is called The Disorderly Knights. Come back soon. We'll be talking about that one. This has been, in the meantime, Dave Butler for High Lowbrow, because culture matters and it's good to have fun.